Hey there, how are you doing? I hope you're having a great course so far and making today an awesome one. So today we're going to be talking about fill adjustments in Photoshop. Now you might ask, what are fill adjustments? Well, the adjustments that fill up the canvas are called fill adjustments. As simple as that. Let me show it to you. It will be more clearer that way. So in Photoshop, there are three kinds of fill adjustments. And how to find out what those three fill adjustments are? It's pretty simple. If you click on the adjustment layer icon right there, every adjustment here has been grouped. See these lines in between? What do you think these lines do? Well, they group up the adjustments. So these four are in a group, these are in a group, these are in a group, and at the top group that you see is the fill group. Every adjustment here fills the canvas. So the first one right here is the solid color adjustment layer. So whatever color you choose, it fills up the canvas with a solid color. So therefore, it is a fill adjustment. Similarly, if you create a gradient, it also fills up the canvas. Now you can have transparency in a gradient, that's up to you. You can have a gradient with 2 colors, with 3 colors, with a ton of colors. That's totally up to you, right? The other way of filling up the canvas is pattern. So you can choose whatever pattern you wish. You can create your own pattern. You can also move the patterns if you want to. So if I make the pattern a little bigger, I can also move it. We're going to talk about all that cool stuff later. But know that these are the three fill adjustments. So let's start with the first one, solid color, and we're going to be looking at some exciting examples, some real world scenarios, and also we're going to create some cool stuff as well along the way. I hope you enjoy it. So without any further ado, let's get started. So let's say we want to color grade this photo. Now there are lots of ways of color grading. We learned how to do it with curves. We can also change colors and modify it using hue saturation. We have also discussed that. And there's also solid colors that you can use, but you might be wondering, how can we use solid colors? It just puts up a solid color on the top of canvas. Well, there are lots of creative ways. We did talk about BlendIF, right? So we can use it right over here. We're going to talk about BlendIF in a little bit more detail here as well. So if you click on the adjustment layer icon and choose solid color, you will see there will be a blob of solid color right there. First of all, let's think of what do we want in the shadows. So in the shadows, I'm thinking that we're going to go with a little bit bluish color, something like this. All right, hit OK. Now we only want it in the shadows. In other words, we can say that we want it removed from the highlights, right? So to remove it from the highlights, we double click on the right hand side of the layer. This opens up the layer styles dialog box. Have a look at this. It shows layer style, and that's why we say layer style dialog box. Inside of that, if you come down right here in the blending options, if you make sure that is selected, down here you will see BlendIF section. This is a very interesting section. Right now, it is in the gray channel. I'm not going to complicate things by going to red channel, green channel, blue channel. If you go there, it will correspond to those channels. But right now, let's just come back to the gray, which is a combination of red, green, and blue. Anyway, so we want to remove this from the bright areas. Now, you might ask, bright areas of where? Well, bright areas of our image. Now, where is the image, my friend? The image is under this current layer that is selected, right? So if we put it in simpler words, we can say that we need to remove bright areas of the layer which is underneath the current layer from the current layer, right? So to take away the bright areas of the underlying layer from the current layer, you go down here in the underlying layer section and take the slider of the right to the left. And we have done this before. So if we take it to the left, you can clearly see that the solid color is hiding from the bright areas. So at the moment, this is very, very harsh. So hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the slider to break it apart to make the transition smoother. Transition between the area where it shows up and the area where it doesn't show up. The more further apart these would be, the more smoother the transition would be. So I'm going to leave it at that and hit OK. So this looks pretty moody. Don't worry about it. It just might look too much, but later we're going to take care of it by using opacity. So the next one we're going to add is for the highlights. So let's create one more solid color, and this time we're going to do a little orangish, bright orangish kind of color for the highlights. Maybe let's do something like this. What do you think? Hit OK. double click on the right hand side of the layer, and this time we want to take it away from where? From the dark areas. We want to keep it in the bright areas. In other words, we can say that we want to take it away or hide it from the dark areas of the underlying layer. So you take the slider of the left to the right. We do just the opposite. Now, as you can see, it is very harsh. So we're going to do the same. Hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the slider to break it apart and take it all the way apart. So this is a pretty interesting color grade that we can see right now. But at the same time, it is kind of too much, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to take care of that later. Right now, I feel that there should be also a tinge of red in the shadows. So if we click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose one more solid color, and I feel maybe a little bit of red might help a little bit. Hit OK, double click on the right hand side of the layer, and we just keep it in the shadows. So take it away from the highlights, break it apart just as we did before, and you can also adjust it the way you like it. You don't have to take it all the way apart. You can control it according to your desire. So I'm going to keep it this way and change the opacity to here about 35. Let's go down a little bit. So have a look how moody this looks. Now, of course, this is kind of too much. So make a group of all of these three. Select the first adjustment, hold the Shift key, select the bottommost adjustment. Everything in the line will be selected, then press Ctrl or Command G, and then you can lower the opacity to whatever you wish, just to give it a little flair right here. 50 is fine. You can also even go lower, but I'm gonna keep it 50 just so you can see the before and after more clearly. Now on top of this, we can do a ton of other adjustments, but before we go forward, here is the before and here is the after. Look at the mood that we create right there. Now to enhance the mood, there's a couple more things we can do. Now this is some advanced compositing stuff, but let's cover it right here. And that is, you can make a selection of the subject first. First of all, let's turn off the color grading. Let's come to the background layer. And then if we select the quick selection tool at the top, you will see select subject. If you're using the later versions of Photoshop, or if you're using an old version, use your favorite technique to make a selection of the subject. Now it does a pretty good job, might miss here and there, so we might want to cover that properly. Okay, yeah, it isn't excellent, but it's kind of workable. If you have more time, you can take your time to kind of improve that. But anyway, I'm going to turn on the color grading, and on top of that, we will create a curves adjustment layer. Now, since there was an active selection, what did we learn before? If you create an adjustment with an active selection, its mask is derived from that active selection. So right now, whatever you do inside the curve will only affect the subject because we had selected the subject beforehand. So I'm going to make it very, very bright. What we are trying to do here is to create some highlights. Okay. Now here's what we do. First of all, let's improve the selection. We're going to take a simple brush, simple soft round brush, and let's make it a little smaller. This is kind of too big. Let's come here in the mask and then let's just correct it, paint with white, just a little bit here and there. You can take your time to smoothen it all up, but I'm going to just do it a little bit. Okay, cool. Now, we will put this inside another group. So with the curves adjustment layer selected, press Ctrl or Command G. And why are we doing that? So that we can have one more mask for the group, and so that we don't disturb this original mask. Let's come to the group and create a negative mask by holding the Alt key or the Option key and clicking on the mask button. Now you can take the brush with a soft round brush. Let's decrease the flow. I'm sorry about that. Let's decrease the flow to about 4%. All right. And now paint with white, just like this, and see the highlights that we are creating. Isn't that pretty amazing? So a little bit of highlights here and there. Maybe we can go a little lower on the flow just to create these highlights and make the subject stand out. See that? Just simple highlights around the edge makes a hell lot of difference. So similarly, we can just paint highlights in here, in here. You can take the time for accuracy, but I'm doing a very quick job right here. Any place where you feel that there's going to be a highlight, those places in the folds and the crevices of the dress, the sweater she's wearing. Just makes her stand out a little bit more. Have a look. Here's the before, here's the after. Just look at it. Now we'll try, if we just move it just above the background layer, does it change anything? Does it change the color a little bit? So here it is at the very top, and here it is at the bottom. It doesn't change very much. I think the one at the top would be fine as well. Alright, so there you go. Just minimal subtle color grading. The more subtle it is, the more professional it's gonna look. So here's the before, here's the after. Now we have gone a little too overboard. So let's make a group of both of these. So select the first one, hold the Control Command, select the second one. You can also hold the Shift key and then press Control Command G. So it's all a group. Now you can control the opacity of how much of it you want in your life. So we're gonna keep it at about 80%, and also I'm gonna open the group and also just decrease the curves to about, let's not go too high, to about 70%. This is nice. So there you go. Here's the before, here's the after. Just subtle color grading to enhance the mood. Now it's time for us to talk gradients. Gradients are pretty cool. So let's say you want to create a music album cover out of this photo, and this makes a great subject, great pose, and a great lighting for it. But before we get into something practical, let's learn what gradients in adjustments are. We already know a little bit about gradients, so if we choose the gradient tool, we can make gradients, drag gradients, but a more non-destructive way of creating gradients is clicking on the adjustment layer icon and choosing gradient from right here. And then you can choose whatever gradient of your choice. You can choose any color that you want and hit OK. Now the great part is you can move the gradient. As long as the gradient fill options are open, you can move it. Isn't that pretty darn cool? And if you move it kind of too much and you want to reset it, you can just click on reset alignment. It's reset. You can change the angle of the gradient. As you change the angle, see the angle changing. Okay. And let's change the angle back to 0. Sorry, 90. All right. You can choose the style of the gradient from right here. So this is linear. There is radial, as the name suggests, one with a radius, circle. All right. There is angle. This is also an interesting gradient. There is reflected, and there is a diamond gradient. So you can choose your choice, move the angle. You can also scale it up, which is just making it bigger or smaller. It's up to you. You can reverse the colors. So right now inside it's red, it's going out to green. You can just click on reverse to reverse it all. See, it reverses here as well, right? Dither is just, will take care of the banding a little bit. It's more advanced. So if you see these banding lines and if you check Dither, see the banding lines go away. I'm not really sure whether you can see it right now because this video is going to be recorded and streamed online. So there's going to be a lot of compression. So you might still be seeing the banding. But that's what it is. It tries to add a little bit of intelligent noise to kind of take away the banding effect. But anyway, let's just keep it turned on. It's pretty good. Hit OK. So that's what it is. Now let's add some interesting colors to it. Now by examples is where we really learn. So let's learn this by an example. Let's go with a pretty cool gradient. So click on the adjustment layer icon and let's choose gradient. And we're going to choose any gradient with 2 colors on it. Or you can just create a gradient from scratch. That's up to you. Now at the bottom, you choose the colors, and at the top you choose the opacities. Okay, so you can have 1 color, 2 color. So if you just want to take away a color, just drag it down. So that color is taken away. If you want to add a color, just click to add a color. If you want to add 1 more color, click to add 1 more color. If you want to change the color of this area, just make sure that is selected and then click on the color, and then you can change the color to whatever you wish. Okay, you can also double click in here to bring up the color picker and change the color. You can also change the location from here as well. So 100% is all the way to the right and 0% is all the way to the left when it comes to location. Now, of course, you can control the opacity. So if you don't want it, if you want it to be absolutely transparent on the right hand side, you can just select the top one and decrease the opacity so it is transparent as it goes to the right. So right now I'm going to keep opacity to 100 of all the places. And this is an interesting gradient, but I'm going to change the colors a little bit. So we're going to go with some interesting greens right there, some bright greens. Now green is a color which we usually don't choose, but green can be cool too. And for the left hand side, we're gonna go with a little bit of blues. How do you feel about this? This interesting. Hit OK. Hit OK again. Now we can move it a little bit up. Let's make sure it's reset, and probably we're gonna move it a little up. Something like this. Interesting. Now scaling, I'm gonna keep it to 100. Hit OK. Now let's change the blend mode from normal to screen. Let's see what happens. Interesting, isn't it? But there's still a lot of color. We want it to have not too many colors. Actually, we don't want it to have colors of its own, just the green and the blue right there. So let's add a black and white adjustment layer just above the background layer. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose black and white. And you can adjust the black and white to your choice. You can just adjust the reds and everything and just make it more exciting. So I'm going to take the reds a little bit to the left anyway. Now let's add a little more contrast. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. And we have learned a lot about curves. Let's add a little bit of brightness in the highlights, just a touch. And for the shadow areas, you can use the hand to control it. So we're gonna just create a point right here and just drag it down. Look at that. That is gorgeous. We'll make a good album cover. All right, I like this. Hit, just cancel it. And there you have it. Interesting one. Interesting design for an album cover. Now I'm thinking of making the blues a little bit deeper, and that's the great advantage of adjustment layers. You can change it anytime. So double click here on the symbol of the adjustment layer. It opens up the properties, and here you can move it even. So I'm going to move it a little bit to the top. Look, it's looking interesting, just like Spotify stuff. Anyway, click on that and just make the greens a little more greener. How do you feel about that? Yeah. That's cool. What about the blues? Just click on that, click on the color, and we can make it a little more saturated. We can bring it a little bit to the top to make it more exciting. Wow, I love this. Hit OK again. Interesting. Now let's write the album cover. Let it be pretty cool. So we're going to go to the text tool right there and type in something. Now the font that I'm choosing here is Beyond. Now it came with my Photoshop, and I'm sure it comes with yours too. And we're going to write in something fun. I just typed in swag. Let's make it a little bigger. And there you go. Isn't that an interesting font? Now let's keep it in the center. How do we make it in the center? Press Ctrl or Command A with the move tool selected first of all. You can select all and then bring it in the center, or you can just click on the three dots right there. You can choose Align to Canvas and then just center it like this. Make sure I usually keep it at selections, and when I have to center something, I press Ctrl or Command A and then center it accordingly. The reason why I do this is because not all the time I want to keep something at the center of the entire canvas. Sometimes I just want to center something according to a specific area. In that case, you would need selection. So I usually keep it at selections by default, but that's up to you. You have to use your Photoshop. It's up to you. You are the artist. You make the choices. My job is to tell you what I do, and also my job is to tell you what are the different ways of doing it so that you can personalize it according to your comfort and convenience. Let's move on to the next one. Now that we are working with gradients, let's do something a little more advanced. How about different lighting? Not just one, but different lighting effects. That would be cool. So let's create gradient. I'm thinking, right? One light from this side, other light from that side. It would be an awesome, just art, piece of art. Okay, so click on the adjustment layer icon, and then again, we're going to choose gradient. And this time we're going to choose a different kind of gradient just to give you a little more variety here. So single click on the gradient. Let's choose this. This has a nice orange. I like the orange right there. On the left hand side, I want to take away this color. We don't need it. And also just decrease the opacity. Click on the top, decrease the opacity. This is a nice one. Hit OK. We want this to be a radio. Now this is exactly the opposite of what we wanted. So click on the reverse. Okay. Now we have a sun-like structure. We can move it wherever we want. So I'm going to move it right over there, and let's make it a little larger. So scaling, let's make it 150. What do you think? This is a good size. Hit OK. We can always change the size. That's up to you. But we want to make sure that with this, we only brighten stuff. We want this to be a light effect. So what do you think is the blend mode that we're going to choose? Well, any blend mode in the lighten group. So again, blend modes are grouped as well. All these groups that you see here, they darken, these ones lighten, and these ones are for the contrast. Well, everything in Photoshop, if you understand the concept, you will become the master instantly. So for this one, let's go for screen. Now, I feel this is too much. So double click on in here. Let's move it a little bit more to the right. And also I'm going to scale down probably 120. Keep it real, man. So there you go. Interesting. Whoops. I kind of moved it accidentally a little too much. Okay, great. Hit OK. Look at the lighting effect. It's so cool, Hollywood-ish. Now, from the left-hand side, let's add one more. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose a gradient again. And this time, this was fine as well. Just take away the right-hand side and also make sure opacity is 0 on the left-hand side. Oops, I'm sorry about what I did. Well, make sure on the left-hand side, the opacity is 100, right-hand side opacity is 0. And the color that we're going to choose here is, what about we choose something like this, bluish color. Okay, this is a nice color. Hit OK. Hit OK again. And again, we're going to choose the the style to be radial. We're going to keep it right here. Just define the center and then you can just control the size to whatever you wish. So this is a good size. How do you feel about 160? Okay. Hit OK once you're satisfied and change the blend mode again to screen. This is indeed a very good size. So now let's bring it a little bit to the left. Just look at the overall color. It's just so amazing. Right? So here's the before. Plain and simple. Here is the after. Now you must be thinking, Unmesh, it's still not exciting. Well, we haven't played the Trump card right here, the MasterCard or the Visa. Just kidding. So you can just create a color lookup table. Color lookup table is the best friend. It just kind of fixes everything at the end. You know, it's like one of those secret spices that fixes everything at the end with food. It's just the same thing here. So we're going to choose the LUT here called Candlelight. I like this. But here's the thing. It just makes everything kind of monochromatic. We don't want to touch the colors. Remember what blend mode we used to choose when we didn't want to touch colors? Luminosity, you guessed it right. If you guessed it. So change the blend mode from normal to luminosity right there, my friend, and have a look at the difference. It's just significant enough. So here's the before, here's the after. Just take a look at it. It's just amazing. It makes it look even more realistic. Now on top of that, you can just come back right here. And then you can just move it according to your preferences. Hit OK. You can also move the other side a little bit according to your preferences. You can just make the size of the gradient or scale the gradient and make it bigger or smaller. That's up to you. One other thing that you can do right here is that if you're creating a light effect, you can also try different blend modes in the lighten group. So let's say for this one, I want to try something different. So right now we tried screen. We can also try color dodge and see how it is. This creates an interesting effect. And with color dodge, you can also control the fill to make it even more interesting. So color dodge is not very exciting in this case, but I think, wow, lighten makes the magic right here. Look at it, it's just a lot of difference. So do you want to know one more secret that's gonna make it even more exciting? And that has to do with gradients as well. So here, if I turn all of these off, we added a gradient from color to absolute transparent. Now, one more important thing, one more significant thing we can do here is that as the color fades out, we can make it fade into a particular color. Wouldn't that be exciting? So we can make it fade into red, green, blue, whatever color we choose. I like this purple right here. Okay, so the right hand side was the same thing. I wanted to fade it to this purple, but at the same time, I want the opacity to go away as well. See, that makes a hell lot of difference. If I take it away, you see the change right there? You see that? If I add that purple, and still if I just take away the opacity, you'll see that there is a change. Okay. So now you hit OK, and we're gonna bring it a little bit more to the left like this. Okay. And similarly, if we do the same with this one, it just creates an amazing crossover effect. So similarly here on the right hand side, if I just add that same color, this color, well, whoops, I kind of messed it up. Okay, on the left hand side was the blue that we added before. something like this. And on the right hand side, we had the purple, but the opacity at 0. Now you can move these to just control how much of it is which color, but this really changes the game. Now you can move it a little bit more to the right to make it a little more exciting. Let's make the color even more bluer. Just a purplish effect. I love it a lot. Hit OK, hit OK again, hit OK. Now, let me share with you one more trick. First of all, let's turn this on. Wow, just look at it. Isn't this wonderful? Now, after you turn that on, you can obviously change these and see what works best for you. And then you can move these later, or you can just increase the scaling. I feel that it should be a little bigger. What about 200? 200 would be too much. 160 or 170 looks nice here. Now, we don't want it so much on the subjects. First of all, let me move it a little bit to the left. We don't want it so much on the... Whoops, my pen slipped. I'm sorry about that. Alright, it's too much on the subject. So if you feel that is the case, well, you can make a group of both of these two gradients. Now we are only talking about gradients right there. Make a group of both of these. Turn off everything. First of all, let's make a selection of the subject by using the same method. We're going to use select subject right here. And now, once the selection is done, now it just messes up a little bit. That doesn't matter a lot. Let's turn on the group. Let's turn on the color lookup. And now, once the selection is active, we want to not apply in that area. To do that, hold the Alt key or the Option key and click on the mask button to create a negative mask. Now it doesn't apply to that area. But we didn't want to completely take it away. So double click on the mask. It'll open up the mask properties. If it doesn't, just make sure you go to Windows and then make sure you just click on the properties and then select the mask. The mask properties will be opened. Now density right here is like the opacity of the mask. So if the density is at 0, it's like there was no mask. If the density is at 100, it's the 100% mask. So we're going to decrease the density and keep it somewhere about 35. That looks good, or 30. Yes. Now, as you can see, this might be very harsh. If you look at the mask, it's a little harsh. So you can just take the brush with white as the foreground color, take a soft round brush, low on opacity at 100, just soften it up around the edges a little bit. So if you open up the mask, you'll be able to see what we are doing. We're just letting a few things inside. Be a little careful. Great. Now let's control the density. $30 was fine. And there you have it. Here's the before, regular portrait. Here's the after. Just look at the special effects. Isn't that pretty cool? Now I feel that I need to make the blues a little bit more bigger at about 200 and move it a little bit to the left. What about 220? It gets a little slow, you know, because the document is pretty huge. Let's move it right up there. Yeah, that looks pretty okay. Hit OK. And there you have it. A pretty darn dramatic, interesting portrait. Now let's talk a little bit about patterns and what they are and how to create it in Photoshop. Well, what are patterns in the first place? Not just in Photoshop, anywhere you see patterns, what are patterns? If you see it in a dress or in a wallpaper, what are they? Well, they're just repeated images. That's it. If you look at up in a dress, maybe there's a polka dot dress, right? The dots are repeated again and again. That's a pattern. It's just repeated image elements. That's it, my friends. So what are patterns? Let's look at some examples in Photoshop. Let's create a new document just to get going. File, new, and we're going to create a simple 2000 pixels document. All right, this is a simple plain document. Let's add a pattern adjustment layer. All right. Now in here, you will see some inbuilt patterns. Some right there. This is the one that I created before. So this is a pattern. Let's say this is one pattern. Here you will find trees, grass, water. So let's choose one of these. It's pretty quick. Now, you can definitely change the angle of the pattern. So this is the pattern once added. You can change the angle. So after you change the angle, it's going to take a little while to rotate. It's a pretty big pattern. Now you can change the scaling, just making it bigger or smaller. So I'm going to make it a little smaller. Let's make it at about 15-ish. Okay. Or let's go with 30 so that you can see how it repeats. Now you can choose link with layer, or you can check it off. What it basically means is that when linking is checked and you try to move the layer, the pattern moves along as well. If it's unchecked, it doesn't. So right now it is unchecked, right? If I hit OK, if I create a brand new layer and let's draw something, right? So with a hard round brush, I am just going to make a simple just design right there. Let's call it a design. And if I select this layer, hold the Control or Command and select the pattern fill layer, press Control or Command T, and if I try to move it, the pattern stays intact. Alright. Now if I go to the pattern properties by double clicking right there, if we choose link with layer, now when you select both of these, press Control or Command T, the pattern moves too. So that is what link with layer is. So I usually keep it checked all the time because you might need it. Okay, so anytime you have moved it kind of too much, you can just click on snap to origin and it snaps. So whenever you create a pattern, you will find a repeating thing right there. So if you look at just one of the leaves right there, just look at this leaf. Just keep on looking down. Just see where this leaf is repeated. And I found it. See, this leaf is repeated right here. This leaf section is repeated right over here again. And this is an example of an excellent, like really excellent pattern, because you cannot really find out where the end is. It just is so seamless. You cannot find that line where the image ends. It is just a really wonderful pattern. And that's how we should create patterns. Just look at the brilliance right there. Just look at the brilliance of how seamless this pattern is. We're going to be talking about how to create seamless patterns in a bit, but creating a pattern like this is no easy task. Making it seamless is hard. So let me share with you one more example and you'll understand what I mean by that, by having a seamless pattern. Let's create one more pattern right there. Even if you choose this pattern, it's so seamless. You cannot see where there's a line and where the pattern tile ends. But if you choose some other pattern, these are some really good patterns. These are some well-made patterns. You can use this as background for your subjects as well. There are a couple I have made in the past, like these ones. These are not as good, but it is seamless too. You can't really tell. Let me share with you a couple more where you can tell what it is. This is also good. Yes, this is a pattern where you can actually tell, but it's not that bad. Yes, this is a pattern where you can tell where the image ends, but if you make it big enough, you can't really tell. This is also a good example of a good pattern. Okay, I really don't have a bad example right there. I have one more example here. This is also a great example of a seamless pattern. If I decrease the scale, make it smaller, you'll be able to see that? It's infinite. No matter how much we move it, it just looks infinite, like never ending. That's the secret of a really good seamless pattern. Now here is an example of not seamless pattern. I won't call it a bad pattern because it's subjective, but here you can clearly see the line. You see the line? See the line where the pattern ends and where it is repeated? This is not such a well-made pattern. If it would be a well-made pattern, you couldn't really tell where the line ends and begins. So to make a seamless pattern, you have to make sure that where it ends in such a way that the beginning is the same. So the beginning and the ending should be the same for a pattern to be seamless. So that's basically a pattern. Now let's go a little more in depth. So first off, let's talk about how do you create a pattern? Well, it's pretty simple. You draw whatever you want or place in any image you want. So let's say in this, I simply drew some polka dots. So with black right there. Okay. I want this to be a pattern, so I make a selection, or you select the entire thing, or you can make a selection of whatever you like. Once you have a selection, then you can go to edit and then define pattern. It's not a well-made pattern. I'm going to show you how to make a good pattern, but this is how it basically created. So once you go to edit and then click on define pattern right there, just as you do with a brush, and I'm going to name it polka.test. Okay, now we have that pattern. So I'm going to just take it all away. Let's go back to how it was before. Anyway, so let's create a pattern adjustment layer, and here you will find the polka dot one right there. It's pretty good, right? You can just move it infinitely. It's a pretty good pattern that we just created. Now we can decrease the scaling. As you can see, there's spaces somewhere. It's not a very well-made pattern, but it's a pattern. That's how you create a pattern. All right. Now it's not transparent at the same time. We can't really change the colors. So make sure when you make a pattern, they're absolutely non-destructive. So instead of painting the polka dots here, we could have just created a brand new layer, and in that layer, we could have just painted, just made sure that everything here would be transparent. And then you made a selection of this, and then you created a brand new pattern. Let's name this polka dot transparent. Polka dot transparent. Okay. Now when you add that pattern, the advantages, so let's create that pattern again, and we're going to choose the polka dot transparent here. Let's decrease the scale to about 50, or let's go for 20-ish. The advantage, you can change the color. You can have another background color. So for the background color, we can have some pinkish color. We can change the color of the pattern to white by creating another solid color adjustment. Let's see the use of solid color. It's so useful. So I'm going to choose white, hit OK. And we want to limit the white to the patterns. So hold the Alt key, the Option key, and click on the line between these two layers to create a clipping mask. Now you can just double click on the symbol of the solid color adjustment layer to change the color to whatever you like. And this is how you just change the color of the pattern, and that's why I told you why to create a pattern in such a way that it's absolutely non-destructive, the most non-destructive it can get. These type of patterns I try to create in a transparent background. There are some where you have no option, where there are lots of colors. We'll talk about those later, like the ones here, like the picturesque patterns, like here we had patterns for the leaves. Of course, we can't create them to be transparent. We had this crazy, amazing pattern. So if I decrease the scale, you'll be able to see this pattern as well. Pretty cool. Now let us learn how to create a seamless pattern, my friend. To keep things simple, I'm just going to create a 1000 pixel document. So let's go to File, New, because the higher the resolution you get, the slower your workflow can get. And right now we are recording, so we don't want to stretch the PC too much. So let's go to Art and Illustration, and let's choose 1000 pixel grid. Click on Create. Well, let's change the background, canvas background, to default the way it was. I don't want to confuse you. I usually keep it black. I like that. But anyway, now let's create a pattern here. Now I'm going to create a solid color black background. Just for reference purposes, we can take it off later, but this is just for reference. Create an empty layer on top of it. Let's say you want to create a pattern of a wave. Very simple pattern, right? So if you try to create it, let's choose a hard round brush or a hard round pressure size. Now the pressure will only be applicable if you're using a Wacom tablet. We have talked about the brush tool in a previous lesson. Go ahead and watch it. Pretty awesome lesson. So now we can just make waves like this. So make sure the opacity and flow are at 100. Now, by the way, to make sure you are making smooth waves, if that's the style you're looking for, if you're just doing it freehand, this is also a nice style. If you want to make smooth, so you can also increase the smoothing right there. This allows you to make smooth waves if you're into that. Now, these waves look cool, right? They look cool and can make a good pattern. I'm going to do one more, just one more right there. Right? Can make a good pattern, seems like it. But if we select it all, press Ctrl or Command A, right now I'm just not taking all of these off. I'm just testing, right? I'm just trying to make a point here. So if you select it all and then go to Edit and then define pattern, waves 1 test. Hit OK. And now when you try to create a pattern in this document or any other document, so I'm going to create a new document, a much larger sized document. Let's go for 3000 by 3000. Let's create it. In here, let's add a pattern, the same pattern that we just created. So if we go ahead and choose the waves pattern right there, there's a problem with that. Can you tell me what the problem is? Have a look closely. These are showing lines in between. They are not continuous. They are not seamless. So if we decrease the scale even further to, let's say, 40, you see, these waves are not continuous. It just doesn't look right. It looks so darn bad. It looks somebody just took an image and tiled it. The secret for a good seamless pattern is for it to look seamless in the first place, right? We don't want to make it look like we just pulled out an image and created a pattern out of it. We don't want the pattern to look like a pattern. We want to make it feel like we actually painted it all throughout. So how do we do that? How do we create a seamless pattern? You see, with Photoshop 2021, they introduced a really amazing feature that helps you with this. Before it was difficult, but right now it's very easy to do. And that feature here is called Pattern Preview. Pattern Preview gives you a real-time preview of the pattern as you are making it. It gives you a preview of how the image is going to look if you transform that, if you create a pattern out of it. So let's get back to where we were. Okay. This was what we were creating. Let's delete this. Let's try to create it again, but this time with Pattern Preview turned on. So let's go to View. Inside of that, let's turn on Pattern Preview. Hit OK, just ignore this, it's fine. Now, as soon as you start drawing, you will see there's a change. From the other side, the line continues and it gives you a real-time preview of how it's going to look if you transform this entire section, this square section that you see, into a pattern. I'm going to change it to gray so that you can just see it more clearly. All right, this entire section, if you just turn it to a pattern, how will it look? Okay, that gives you a real-time preview of that. Well, now what we can do, we can just start drawing without worrying and just make sure we connect it. Now it's a continuous pattern. Similarly, you can just start drawing from anywhere. It doesn't have to be inside. Just connect it. Now you can just, with an eraser, you can just correct it here and there, but you get the point. It really helps you to create a seamless pattern. I'm going to choose a hard round brush right there for the eraser. And also smoothing a little bit. You get the point. You can take your whole sweet time with this, but this is super cool. Now let's get back to the brush, draw a few more. It gives you a real-time preview of how it's going to look for you. Better try one more time, okay? I'm so sorry. Yeah, I kind of messed up here. So no problem, we can erase this section. Take the brush and do it here again. And by the way, if you want to see which area of the brush is painting, if you're choosing a pressure size brush, then you can always press the caps lock key. It just turns it into a crosshair. It gives you a real-time preview of how it's going to look and exactly where it is going to paint. So you can just draw a line right there and then with an eraser kind of fix it. So let's go to the eraser here. Don't forget the caps lock. And now we can easily fix it. Or you can go to the pen tool and then you can just draw path like this to correct it. So something like this would do, I feel. Look what we are doing just for simple stuffs like this. I'm gonna create one more from the beginning. Okay, that looks all right. And okay, so now you can just finish it, right click on it and click on make selection, or you can just hold the control key or the command key and hit enter or return to make a selection out of it, and then just take it away. Just press the delete key to erase that area. It's just as smooth as just silk. So let's do it at the top, or you can just do the eraser. I'm just feeling too lazy to use the pen tool to kind of perfect it to the inch. There you go, it just works too. And there you have an interesting pattern. You can just draw the fourth line. I'm feeling a little lazy, so I'm just gonna copy this. So yeah, once you have that, just with the move tool, hold the alt key or the option key and drag it down like this. See, you don't even have to worry about the top and the bottom. So as soon as you bring something from something to the bottom, it just comes back from the top. It's a good sign of a good pattern preview. Really helpful technique, and this is going to show you how your pattern is going to look. See, it gives you a real-time preview of that. Isn't that pretty cool? Now to save the pattern, you can turn off the pattern preview if you want by going to view and just click on pattern preview again, and then press Ctrl or Command A. If you want it to be transparent, just turn off everything, just keep that thing on. Go to edit and then define pattern, waves, final. That's how we actually save things. Final, freaking final. Anyway, so this is what we have, and now wherever you want to add this pattern, it's going to be seamless. So if you ever wanted to add it to a background, it's going to be exciting too. So let me see if we have something where we can add this. So if when we were making this swag, remember this music cover, if you wanted to add a pattern here, we could do that. I'm just experimenting here, guys. So on top, we can just add a pattern. And the pattern we're going to choose here is this one. Pretty cool. We can, of course, change the scale to whatever we wish. We can just make it bigger. We can make it smaller. That's up to us. But 100 is fine. Hit OK and decrease the opacity, of course. It's a good pattern. So let's go with 5, an interesting one. And also we want to fade it at the top. So select the mask right there. Just add a gradient. So we want a gradient from white to black. And also we want a linear gradient, not a radial one. We can just do some like this. So it slowly and gradually just shows up at the bottom. And then you can move the swag a little bit to the down. This is also an interesting pattern just to make the album a little more exciting. I don't know how exciting it makes it, but that's how you can use a pattern. There are lots of ways to use it. You can use it as background for your subjects. You can use it in greeting cards. You can use it as a design element. You can use it to just print wrapping paper if you're into that. So there are tons of ways. Let's move on to the next example. Now this was a very simple wave. You can take it to as advanced as you want. Just turn on pattern preview and start doodling or start creating something with the pen tool. It's up to you. And sky, or I don't like to say that. I like to say cosmos or the entire universe. And actually there is no limit. I was going to say cosmos is the limit, but there actually is no limit to the infinite number of possibilities of designs that you can create. I'm going to show this to you for inspiration. So let's take a look at this pattern. Isn't that exciting? Now, how do you know it's a continuous pattern? Well, if I open that up in Photoshop, I actually bought all of these. I licensed all of these patterns from a stock website on the internet. So if we open one of these in Photoshop and if we turn on pattern preview, if it's a continuous, good, seamless pattern, you won't see any borders or where the image ends or any abrupt lines like we did in the waves when we were just creating it without pattern preview. So if we go to view and then pattern preview, have a look. Just look at this. All right, I'm just gonna unlock the background layer. And if I try to move it, take a look. Can you anywhere see where the pattern ends and begins? Right? We can't. There isn't one single abrupt line. This is a sign of a really good, really greatly made pattern. There are lots of ones that you can just go haywire with it. You can just draw any way you want. You can draw some like this. I drew something like this. I remember I showed it off in Adobe Max conference last year. So it was pretty cool too. You can draw something like this. This is also really well made pattern. And even if you open the most complex one, so let's try that one. And also waves, the one we did, you can go even more complex and do something like this, right? And if I open this, because this is a really good one that I liked. So let's just open that one. And even if you check this, you will notice that this is also a seamless pattern. A seamless pattern is a pattern where the ending is same as the beginning and the ending and the beginning is continuous. So let's go to view and pattern preview. And here you will notice you can't really see where the pattern ends and begins. That's a good pattern, sign of a good pattern. You can also create some interesting patterns out of different elements. The amount of ways that you can create patterns is actually just up to your imagination. So I licensed some elements online and I have some elements from the web. So it's actually an Illustrator file. You can also get PNG files or create your own or just get in your images. That's up to you. My point here is you can create a pattern with these individual elements as well. So this is actually in Illustrator. So if I open this, it opens up in Adobe Illustrator because this is a vector file. Either way, you can just place items from the Illustrator or you can just place individual items. That's up to you, just regular images. So if we go to File, New, and let's choose 2000 pixel grid because we want it to be a little higher quality. And now let's choose a background of a little bright yellowish. Okay, something like this, a little less saturation here. Now let's try to paste in these elements. So we're gonna go with this one, the hot dog cart. Let's select that, press Ctrl or Command C. Let's come back to Photoshop, paste it. Now we don't want to paste it as pixels, definitely as smart objects, and we don't want to add it to the library. Just make sure it's not checked, hit OK. If you want to add it, that's up to you. So I placed it. Now let's first turn on, go to View, and then Pattern Preview. Hit OK. And see how the pattern is going to be if we just pasted this. So we can just turn it a little bit. Just take it right there. Great. Okay. Interesting pattern you can see right there. Let's go to Illustrator. And then this time, let's go for this teddy bear, prize bear. So let's go back to Photoshop, paste it as pixels or smart objects. Let's go with smart objects as we did before. And we're going to place it right over there. And let's place a couple more elements. And I'm trying to show you what I mean by creating a pattern out of different elements. So this one, let's come here. Let's paste this one as well. I'm going to keep it right there, make it a little more smaller. And let's do a little more. This ice cream looks delicious and interesting. Let's come back to Photoshop and paste this one as well. We're going to move it a little bit, rotate it, paste it. Then let's go with the, what do you think? What should we choose? This hot air balloon. Let's go back to Photoshop and paste it here as well. Okay. Now this is an interesting pattern, okay? But now I feel the adjustment is not nice, and if I zoom out, there are some spaces which are left out. And that is where Pattern Preview can really help you adjust and shape it. You don't have to just adjust it inside it. Just zoom out and it gives you a limitless preview of the entire pattern. Just you can just go in there and you can move one of these. You can just select the hot dogs by selecting that layer, or if auto select is checked, you can directly select it, but I usually prefer to keep it unchecked. You can momentarily turn on auto select by holding the control or command and clicking on the object of your choice, and it automatically selects that layer. So I can simply fill it, fill the space, fill the space, fill the space, just move it. Just make sure every space is nicely, evenly filled in. Now when you zoom out, it looks pretty much interesting. But if you look at the square, how would you have guessed that this arrangement would work perfectly? So if you turn off pattern preview, now keep in mind pattern preview is just a preview. How would you have guessed that this would work, right? But right now, if you turn it off, the teddy bear that goes out, it just doesn't come back in. So you might have to turn on pattern preview so that you can see what's happening in there. And then you select it all by pressing Ctrl or Command A, and then go to Edit, Define Pattern. Just make sure the pattern preview is turned on, especially when you're dealing with objects. Now let's name this Fair Pattern. So if you're creating a greeting card of a fun fair or an invitation or birthday party invitation, these are the kind of patterns that really attract children. So if I create a new one, and we actually made a 3000 by 3000. Here you will be able to see. So if you create a pattern here, you will find actually this one. Okay, now you can move it any which way you want. You can just scale it. So I'm gonna make it at about 50%. It's a super interesting one. On top of that, you can just write some text. We could have made it transparent as well so that we can change the background to whatever color we wish, but doesn't really matter. I'm gonna just change the background to that color and just decrease the opacity. And then you can just write in there happy birthday or whatever you wish, or an invitation. Isn't that an exciting one? It's really exciting. A text over it will look really amazing. Let's write a text so that you can see how it would look. So have a look. Isn't that a super cool effect? If I create an interesting font, brown color would look nice on it. Let's go with the font Y Sans. It's interesting as well. So there you go. It's a modern, pretty nice design. We can go with a brownish color on this one, and there you have it. A very interesting pattern with text. You can always center it. There you go. So that's how to work with fill adjustments in Photoshop. Again, what are fill adjustments? The adjustments which fill the canvas. As simple as that. We talked about solid color, we talked about gradient, and we also talked about patterns. There's a ton actually you can do in patterns beyond what we can cover in this entire course. There's so much into it. Just know the basic concepts of how they work. Solid color is just simply a solid color. There's nothing actually more to it unless you do something for it. We can just apply a blend mode to it. We can apply blend if to it. We can just creatively use masks for it. There's a ton of ways that we can incorporate it in our workflow. Most important use of solid color adjustment is to create a background, create a solid background. It's also a very useful feature. Secondly, we have gradients. Gradients is just going from one color to the other in a gradient. And it allows you to add as many colors as you wish. It allows you to add transparency, and then you can incorporate it in any way you want. We looked at some really good real-world examples of using gradients in Photoshop. We created light flares, light effects. You can just create some gradient backgrounds. That's up to you. And patterns, the more I say, the more there is to learn. The most important thing to keep in mind with patterns if you're creating it is the pattern preview. It's a groundbreaking feature with Photoshop 2021. So if you haven't updated and you plan to use patterns a lot, I would highly recommend updating to 2021 just for this one feature if you're especially into graphic designing or you're using patterns for any other reason of your choice. I hope this lesson helped. See you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.